In May 1779, British forces captured Stony Point, a rocky promontory on the Hudson River. Its location allowed them to control river traffic and threaten the vital American fort at West Point. The British quickly fortified the position with earthworks, abatis, and heavy cannon. For weeks, redcoats and loyalist troops transformed the rocky headland into a formidable outpost. To George Washington, the loss was a serious blow, as Stony Point gave the enemy a strong foothold deep in New York. George Washington refused to let Stony Point remain in British hands. From his headquarters in New Jersey, he studied reports on the enemy fortifications and terrain. He decided on a daring counterstrike, a night assault to surprise and overwhelm the garrison. Washington entrusted the mission to General Anthony Wayne, whose aggressive spirit had earned him the nickname Mad Anthony. The plan required secrecy, discipline, and courage, for the men would have to advance in silence and storm the works with bayonets alone. General Wayne assembled a force of about 1,300 light infantry for the attack. The men were carefully chosen, hardened veterans of earlier campaigns. They received strict instructions. No musket fire was to be used, only bayonets to maintain surprise. Soldiers prepared strips of white paper and cloth to pin to their hats so they could recognize one another in the darkness. On the evening of July 15th, 1779, the troops gathered near the Hudson, silent and tense as they awaited the signal to march. As darkness fell, Wayne's troops began their silent march toward the British outpost. The path was treacherous, winding through marshes and rocky ground. Soldiers moved in single file, guided only by the faint light of the moon and the steady beat of their officers' whispered commands. Every sound seemed dangerous, for discovery would ruin the attack before it began. At the front, Wayne rode with determination, knowing the entire plan depended on reaching the fort undetected. Inside the walls of Stony Point, the British garrison remained confident and unsuspecting. Around 600 soldiers of the 17th Regiment of Foot, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Henry Johnson, manned the fort. Guard posts were set, but lightly watched. The men believed an attack on such a rocky, fortified position was unlikely. Fires flickered in the barracks as sentries paced lazily along the ramparts. The Hudson tide rose and fell below the cliffs, masking the faint sounds of movement beyond the darkness. At midnight, the signal was given for the attack to start. A small group carrying axes rushed forward to clear the wooden barriers surrounding the fort. The British sentries, startled by movement in the darkness, fired a few shots and shouted the alarm. In moments, the still night erupted into chaos as the Americans surged up the steep slopes. Bayonets flashed in the moonlight while men struggled over rocks and obstacles. Despite musket fire from the walls, the attackers pressed on, climbing hand over hand toward the fort's defenses. The Americans broke through the outer defenses and poured into the fort from both flanks. In the dim light, soldiers clashed at close quarters, using bayonets, musket butts, and fists. Cries of alarm and the clash of steel echoed through the narrow passages. Some British soldiers fought fiercely, while others threw down their weapons in confusion. Amid the struggle, Wayne was struck in the head by a musket ball, but he refused to leave the field. Supported by his men, he urged them forward, shouting for no quarter to be taken unless surrender was clear. Within 25 minutes, the battle was decided. The British lines crumbled under the coordinated assault from both flanks. Redcoats who resisted were quickly overwhelmed by bayonet charges in the darkness. Colonel Henry Johnson realized further defense was hopeless and ordered his men to lay down their arms. As dawn approached, the Americans gathered the prisoners and secured the fort's walls. The stars and stripes were raised over Stony Point, marking one of the boldest and swiftest victories of the Revolution. With Stony Point in American hands, the victors quickly dismantled the British defenses. Dozens of cannon, muskets, and stores of ammunition were captured intact. news of the victory spread rapidly through the colonies, lifting morale at a time when hope had been fading. General Washington praised Wayne's success as an example of discipline and courage. However, aware that British reinforcements could soon return, Washington ordered the fort to be evacuated after removing everything of value. The destruction of Stony Point denied the British a foothold on the Hudson and proved the resilience of the Continental Army. News of the loss at Stony Point stunned the British High Command in New York. General Sir Henry Clinton viewed the defeat as a humiliation and demanded an immediate counterattack. Within days, British troops sailed up the Hudson to retake the abandoned position. They found the fort empty, its walls shattered, and its stores gone. Clinton ordered the defences rebuilt, but recognised that the damage to British prestige could not be repaired so easily. The daring American assault forced the British to strengthen every post along the river, diverting men and resources from other campaigns. The success at Stony Point was celebrated throughout the American colonies. Congress passed a formal resolution praising General Wayne and his light infantry for their courage and discipline. Medals were commissioned to honor the leaders of the assault, a rare distinction at the time. General Washington expressed special admiration for the operation's precision and restraint. He emphasized that it demonstrated how disciplined American forces could rival professional European armies. Across the colonies, newspapers hailed Stony Point as proof that the revolution's cause was far from lost.